Okay, artists, so we are going to start something new. We are going to create a paper weaving. But before we can even get to the weaving process, we need to create some painted paper to use. So today you're going to get 2 pieces of paper, and I want you to completely cover those pieces of paper with paint. You can use any colors, you can use any design. So if you remember, when we use our tempera paint cakes, we want to make sure that when we use these, we don't mix the paints together in the palettes because that will ruin the colors for us. So we want to make sure that if we're mixing paint, we either use it on our paper or on our messy mat. Now, when you look at your paint palette, they are organized by warm. Sometimes this can be a warm color of pink, and cool. Sometimes this could be a cool color of purple. We don't really need to use the white today. But when you are using your colors on your paper, I want you to think about what colors might mix well together and what colors may not. So if you don't know if a color will mix well, test it on your messy mat. But if you look at our colors, red and green are complementary colors. So if we mix those 2 colors together, we're probably going to end up with a brown. If we mix together our blue and orange, we're going to get a brown. And if we mix together our purple and yellow, we're going to get a brown. But most of these other colors, if we mix them together, we will get a color that we can still use. So the very first thing I need to do before I start painting is I need to code the back of my paper. So I'm going to go ahead and write my name. Don't forget your class code, which is the initial and grade level that you're in. So I'm going to go ahead and code both of my papers because these are going to be covered in paint and I want to make sure that I know which one is mine. So I'm going to go ahead and dip my brush into the water. And I'm going to start with that purple color. And like I said, you can do any design. You can do any kind of a pattern. You are the artist. You get to decide. I want to add another color right now. Can I go ahead and just dip it into my yellow? No. I need to dip it in my water? No. I need to wipe it on my messy mat first. And then I can dip it in the water before changing colors. So I'm going to grab some blue now. And I can do, like I said, any colors, any patterns. So I'm going to go ahead and paint both of my papers so that the whole paper is filled with color. And then we will use these papers when they're dry for our paper weaving. Now that I have my 2 painted papers dried and ready, I can start creating a loom to weave on. So a loom is what we use to weave our warp threads on. Instead of using thread and fibers, we're using paper. So you need to take a look at your 2 painted pieces of paper and you need to decide which one you want to use as your loom. So I'm looking at both of my pieces and I think that I want my pinks and blues and purples to be my loom. So I'm going to go ahead and set my other paper aside. This is going to be my loom. So when I look at my loom, I need to prepare it. So the very first thing that I need to do is I need to fold my paper in half vertically. So I'm going to go ahead and aim for my best to match my corners up as best as I can. I have folded my paper in half. Now at the top, I need to fold down just one side. Notice I don't have both sides of my paper, just one side. I need to fold down about a thumb width. And so when I fold that top half of my loom down, I have created a fold line. And this fold line is now going to be called the stop line. So anytime our fingers or our scissors get close to that fold line, we're going to yell stop. So here I go. Stop! We want to stop right there, and that's important because our next step is we're going to be using some scissors to do some cutting, and we want to make sure that we don't cut past our fold line. So that's why we were calling it the stop line. So I want you to take a look at your folded paper right now, and I want you to think about where half might be. So if I needed to divide this in half, I want to look for the middle. So is this the middle? No, not really. How about over here? No. How about right there? That looks like it's pretty close to the middle. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut from the fold line all the way to my stop line. And I don't want to go past my stop line. So here we go. Being really careful. And when my scissors get close, I'm going to stop. I don't want to go any further than that stop line. So right now I have cut my paper in half. I need to cut my paper into quarters though. Right now this is half. So if I need to cut this in quarters, what should I do? I don't want to cut a line here because then my bottom pieces will fall off. So if I want to cut this into quarters, I need to cut each half in half again. So then I would have 1, cut is here, 2, 3, if we cut here, 4. So I need to find the middle of my halves and cut again and stop at that fold line. So I'm going to find the middle of this half. I'm aiming for my best. Stop. Don't want to cut any further than that stop line. So now I have 1, 2, 3 pieces on my loom, but I need 4. I need quarters. So I'm going to find the half of this. I'm going to aim for my best, and I'm going to cut all the way to my fold line. Stop. No further than that line. Now I have fourths or quarters, but now I need to go even further and I need to make these into eighths. So how might I take these fourths and turn them into eighths? If I have 4 pieces, how can I turn that into 8? What if we cut each of these 4 strips in half? How many might we get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That would be eighths. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut each of my quarters in half. I'm going nice and slow, aiming for my best. When I get to the fold line, stop. So 1, 2. I'm going to do the same thing here. Stop. And again here. Find the middle. Stop. And again here, last one. Stop. Now if I did this correctly, I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. I have created my loom into eighths. The next step is to slowly and carefully open up your folded and cut paper, and you have now created a paper loom. We are going to carefully set this paper aside, and we are going to start creating threads or weft threads with our paper. Instead of thread and string, we're using paper. So it's time to turn this paper into weft threads. Our loom is vertical. These lines are vertical. So our weft threads, we need to cut horizontally. So what we're going to do is we are going to flip our paper over on the back, so the same side that we see our name. I have it sitting in front of me horizontally. We're going to use a ruler. You're going to have pencils, but I have a marker so that you can see better. And I want you to line the edge of that ruler up to the edge of your paper as best as you can to get a nice straight line. And I want you to show me a nice straight line on the back of your paper. And I want you to do that again. Line that ruler up to your line. So I'm trying to make it very even as best as I can. And I'm going to keep going all the way across my paper. So I'm going to line my ruler up as best as I can so I can get nice straight lines. And when I get to the end, if it's a little bit bigger, that's okay. I don't need a tiny little line. I can leave it right there. Now I've divided my warp and weft threads. So the warp is the loom. These go up and down. And my weft are the threads that go side to side. Now that I have made these lines, I'm going to use my scissors and I'm going to aim for my best to cut each strip out as best as I can and as straight as I can so that I can have a pile of weft threads to use for my weaving. I'm going slow. I'm aiming for my best to keep my scissors following right on those straight lines that I've just drawn. So now I have everything I need to start weaving. I have my loom of paper with my warp marks, and I have my wefts or my horizontally cut papers that I can use to weave. Now, when you weave, we are going to do a pattern. And our pattern is an A-B-A-B pattern. And we are going to be going over, under, over, under, over, under. So A-B-A-B-A-B, which means over, under, over, under, over, under. We're going to repeat that over and over again. So for my loom, each of my warp threads is going to be used for my weaving. So if I remember A, B, A, B, A, B, which is over, under, over, under, over, under, I'm going to start A, which is over. So my weft paper is going to go over my first warp thread. And then what comes after over? Under. So now I have went over, under. What comes next? A, B, A, B, A, B, over, under, over, under, over, under. So I need to go over. And then the next one should be, that's right, under. The next one should be over, under, over, under. So if I followed my pattern correctly, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And I'm going to push that weft thread all the way up to the top of my fold line as best as I can. Now here's where it gets tricky. We're going to take another weft thread. And we are going to repeat our A-B-A-B pattern, but we have to make sure that we don't do it exactly the same. The next thread, if we started over here, we need to go under here. So under, the next one would be over, and then under, over. So I'm following my A-B-A-B pattern. Under, over, under, over. So I followed the same pattern, but it was opposite as my first one. So if I push that up, this time, instead of starting over, it was under. So my pattern was under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over. But I want to show you what will happen if you forget to alternate. So this next weft thread should start over because that's what happened up here. Over, under, so this one should be over. But I want to show you what would happen if I accidentally did the same one as above. So I'm doing this wrong. So if I do it wrong and I go under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, what happens is it just starts falling out. It's not secure like the rest. Okay, so we need to make sure that we repeat and alternate our patterns. So over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. The next one, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over. So the third one should be over or under? Over. So over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And I'm going to push that up to the top just like I've been doing. Okay, so let's see if you can remember. What do we start with here? Over or under? Under. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish weaving my weft papers all the way to the bottom of my weaving. Okay, I'm getting close to the bottom and I notice that I still have extra weft strips left, and that's okay because I might not be able to fit all of my weft threads in anymore. If you can look, I'm struggling to get that last weft thread in. So I'm going to go try to push all of my strips up to the top as best as I can to see if I can fit any more in, and that gave me a little extra room. So now I can check and see if I can fit one more in, and oh, I had enough room. I had enough room to fit the last one in. And it's okay that I still have 2 strips left because I need to think about the borders that are at the top and the bottom. So I'm going to be really careful because I don't want to rip my paper. I don't want to rip my loom or my warp or my weft threads. So I need to be really careful on this last one. Be super gentle, making sure that I am not ripping any of those papers while I finish off my paper weaving. Okay, now that I have finished my paper weaving, it's time for the final step. So I'm just going to set that aside, and you are going to get a black piece of paper. And what we're going to do is we are going to be using our weavings as a background underneath of this black paper. We are going to create a symmetrical design, a design with symmetry. So while that black paper is sitting in front of me horizontally, I am going to fold it as best as I can to match those corners up. And I want to make a half of a heart design because symmetry means it's going to be exactly the same on either side of this line of symmetry or this fold line. So if this is my line of symmetry, and if I want to have something be exactly the same on both sides of that line of symmetry, then the easiest way to do that would be to fold it in half and cut on the fold so that way when I open it, I will have a heart shape that is perfectly symmetrical. But I have to be careful that I'm drawing and cutting on the fold line, because if I accidentally draw and cut on this open line, I will have 2 pieces of a heart that are not connected. And to make this symmetrical, I need it to be connected. So if you need to draw with your pencil first, that's fine. I'm going to maybe use my Sharpie. And I know that if I think about a half of a heart design, it's going to be kind of pointed at the bottom and curved. Almost looks like a J. I want to make sure that I am not going to be cutting too close to the top or the bottom, so I've left enough room here and here so that way when I open my paper up, it's not too close to the edges. So now that I have done the half of my heart shape, I'm going to take my scissors. Remember, I have to make sure that I'm on the fold line. And I'm going to carefully trace my line of my half of a heart. And if I've done this correctly, when I open it up, I will see a perfectly symmetrical heart design. So what's going to happen is I'm going to take that black paper and I am going to glue it right onto my paper weaving so that I can create a work of art that has symmetry and paper weaving. So when we glue, we should think about dot, dot, not a lot. So when I glue, I should think about dot, dot, not a lot. But I'm going to need extra glue besides just in the corners. So I might want to do a couple of dots along the areas of my black paper to help secure it to my paper weaving. So I'm going to do a couple in the corners along the edges. I don't want too much, so I'm not squeezing a long line of glue, but I am making sure that there are enough dots to secure it to my weaving. I'm going to aim for my best to line it up. And now that you have that black paper, you could use your scissors to trim the edges of the weaving that are peeking through. And you can also use construction paper crayons to draw a design on top of your black paper. I'm going to take a minute and do those right now. So I finished my paper weaving design with some construction paper crayons, and that is how we create a loom with warp threads and weft threads with paper. You've just completed your very first paper weaving.